Hello and welcome to the Retro Rejects. On this week's episode, we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of being in a fight club. So, when was the first time you joined the fight club?
I suppose going back to when it actually was released, what was it? Was it 99? Was it 2001? I would have seen it about 4 or 5 times in the cinema, and I decided to start my own fight club then. Obviously, no, I didn't.
But this is one of your favourite films.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I remember seeing it when it first came out. I would have been in college at the time. Went to see it on my own because nobody else is interested in going to see it, and I was just like, "Oh my god, this film is fucking fantastic." It's one of those films as well that I suppose we rewatched it recently just to, remind ourselves of it and refresh and all the rest. And it's a film that it probably is as relevant, if not more relevant now than it was 20 odd years ago when it first came out.
Yeah, I think I'd be up there with one of my top 10 movies anyway, and definitely rewatch it. It's amazing. The amount of bits and pieces I forgot in the film. I've seen it a ton of times, but it's probably been a year or 2 years since we've looked at it.
Yeah.
But it's just one of the things I think you don't get with a lot of modern films anymore is something when Fight Club, the amount of different themes that are in it or the different interpretations, I suppose.
Yeah, there's so many different layers that you can kind of go, oh, maybe that means that, and maybe they're addressing that, which we'll get into a bit more in the podcast as well. But there are so many different ways you can interpret what each character is meant to represent or what the issue is and all the rest.
And I think that's great art.
Yeah.
Like you look at it, say just kind of Fincher's thing of it. It's like a coming of age movie about it, and it's like you look up. I'm sure there's books being written about Fight Club as well, but you look into kind of things, and like one of the most common things is that it's about toxic masculinity and all these different bits and pieces. And then it's hard to know where to get started with it, but it's just. And then, like, you kind of forget the more you look at it, the more you look into it, or you think that there's more to it than there probably actually is with it. And then, like, you read it, like, I think one of the screenwriters thought that it was like basically like a fucking rom-com.
Far from a rom-com, really, isn't it? Yeah.
But it's, it can be just broken down to a very, very basic thing instead of, like, I was looking at someone doing it and they were saying that it was like rationalization. I think it was rationalization, where it was breaking down into this whole kind of post-industrial world where kind of everything was just like, people being consumers, and it was basically like being consumers was like equated to fascism. And that's what the movie was. And like there's elements of that I think in it, but I don't think that's what the intention of it was. But that doesn't matter. Like art, the intention of a piece of art can be very, very different from
the interpretation.
Of it, I suppose, yeah. Sometimes people don't even realise what they're putting into things, and it can be.
Well, if we go back to sort of, obviously we kind of explain the plotline a little bit and all the rest, and I'm sure anyone listening to this should be familiar with Fight Club. If you're listening to a podcast on it, you would probably be interested in having seen it. But at the time that it came out, it probably would have resonated quite well with people of our age, shall we say, because we would have been
Generation X,
a little bit younger than the protagonists, insofar as they were out and they already had their jobs and they were working, but we were sort of in that world as well. So I suppose the older Gen X would have really, I think, kind of held on to this film as something that would have been very representative of their own experience. You're told as a child, you go to school, you study hard, you work hard, you get a good job, and you'll be, get a job, get a life, get a family, get the house and all the rest. And then people graduate and there's nothing there for them. It's just emptiness. And, people who've worked hard for their college degrees or whatever, they end up pumping gas, they end up being waiters, they end up in all these, I won't say lower jobs, but they're all these sort of dead-end jobs, shall we say, with no potential to rise up through it, and you're just plodding away.
Well, it was the whole thing where you were told that, like, we were very much told, our generation, you leave school, you go to college or university, whatever you want to call it, and then
you can be anything you want.
Yeah, you're going to nearly automatically walk into a great job and your whole life is sorted and you don't have to worry about anything. Where it became very, very clear, especially like people outside of Ireland might notice that Ireland used to. So it was in the 90s. I think they stopped it in the 90s where it was like free third level education.
Yeah.
So you had fucking probably large portion of the country went on to get like a degree,
educated basically.
And
then all of a sudden your degree is worthless because
everyone has a degree.
Yeah.
Our generation definitely was a whole thing where it was like people were kind of twigging to not twigging to the whole degree, because it was like people were like, well, you need to have a degree just to get a basic job. And it was this whole thing where it was like, our generation was like, get a degree in the arts. Fuck it, you may as well get a degree in something that you enjoy doing.
Yeah,
and something
enjoy studying for the 4 years. But yeah, like, I mean, it was this whole thing of, the dream is shattered. You leave college all kind of bright-eyed and optimistic, kind of going, yeah, I studied hard and I'm going to get a job in my field. And then it's like, most people end up just getting your basic entry-level jobs, working retail, working night shifts, stacking shelves, pumping gas, all of that kind of thing, because that's literally all you can get. You're almost held down to that level, if you know what I mean. There is very little ability to progress.
Well, you can imagine like the generation nowadays where it's like, at least say in fucking Fight Club, your man could buy an apartment.
That's it, he could afford to buy.
You're not going to buy an apartment now.
That's it, I know. At the time it was like people filled the empty hole in their lives, there wasn't relationships there, everyone was very isolated. It was like, while you make a nice home for yourself, you buy things to distract you from your shit job that you hate. And again, I suppose the job he was working, it'll be seen as a very good job nowadays, working for a corporation. But again, he has seen how this mindless, soulless corporation was making loads of money, basically profiting off people's debts. He was kind of a crash assessor, and it was the equation was, well, if the money that it costs to pay out all of these people is less than the cost of a recall of the product, well, then we don't recall the product and we just pay out all the people who have died. And it's a very cynical, morbid way of looking at life. And here he is working in this job, just going, oh my God, I hate everything.
Yeah. It's like the whole thing with like the self-serving or single serving portions where it's like single serving friends and
because his whole life is so disjointed. He's basically flying all over the country into different time zones to go and see the scenes of accidents and assess them, and that's I suppose what causes his insomnia in large part in the first place, which is where we sort of enter into his life and meet him as he goes on his spiral. Some could say downward spiral, some could say spiral to enlightenment. It depends on what way you view it, I suppose, and many different ways to interpret it.
Well, that was the whole thing, that when you look at it on Wikipedia, when they're talking about Fincher's thing where he's like on about like, rites of passage, where it's you have to, there's a whole thing with people about kill your God, kill your parents, kill your God, and kill yourself. And he's very much on that kind of journey where his parents are no longer in the picture, and it is they're kind of considered canon that there's like Fight Club 2 and 3 were done in comic book form. And it's, well, not mentioned, it's very much a big thing in part 2 and 3 that the narrator, Jack's, like it is Jack is meant to be, in the book it was Jack. That he's fucking, whatchamacallit, his parents were killed by him. By Tyler Durden, basically, when he was younger. And in those things, I won't get into too, because the sequels, a lot of people don't really like them, and after reading them, wasn't really. See why. I'll get into it later on, but it's like Tyler Durden is very much. He's basically like Satan, or they talk like about him as being like a virus, mind virus or a thought virus that goes through, or an archetype, a Jungian archetype that's been around forever, and he's like, gone through Jack's family, kind of like, slowly passing on, kind of creating or trying to create vessels for himself to
cause chaos, I suppose, and ruin lives. But yeah, like, I mean, if you go back to Tyler Durden of the film, which is the main thing we're focusing on, like, I mean, as I said, we enter into Jack, I suppose, in his forlorn, terrible, drab little life where he's, riddled with insomnia, can't sleep, has no one to talk to about it, he has passing acquaintances at work, and that's it. And he ends up then, a doctor basically challenging him when he goes in to try and get a cure for his insomnia. He's like, well, you're not really suffering, go and see real suffering, go down to one of these support groups, or you see these guys, facing death and staring it down. So he's like, right, okay, I will. And suddenly he finds a place where he can actually release these feelings. So I suppose it speaks to, as you went back to the whole toxic masculinity thing, where, it's always seen that you bottle up your feelings.
Well, it was with our generation, and definitely the generations before us, where it's like, you do not talk about your feelings. If you talk about your feelings, there's something wrong with you.
You're not as much of a man or something like that. Yeah, exactly. Men just bottle things up and they just shove it down and get on with things. Whereas, that's, Tyler Durden as well. He's like, look, we're all these like fatherless children that are just, wandering through life and don't know what is what, and we've no one to talk to, no one to express our feelings to, and nobody listens to us. So I'm going to make people listen to us, basically. I'm going to go out there, cause mayhem, build a sort of a family, a really weird family unit, I suppose. But it is, if you look at it, it is kind of like a family unit for all these lost souls, I suppose, really, that want to find some meaning in life, come together and end up doing the Project Mayhem thing.
And Meatloaf's Bob is definitely the maternal factor in it, where he is quite sensitive and stuff, and I think that's nearly the catalyst for Jack changing and kind of going away from Tyler. The split even more so after he gets killed, where it's like nearly the feminine part of his life is after being, when his mother is dead and he's nearly questioning kind of where with the father, with Tyler Durden, because Tyler ends up being like his father, going off, he abandons him, going around creating franchises.
Exactly, starting new families and having people outside of him that he cares for and all this kind of stuff.
And then he goes on like the road trip, which is like, in kind of like Joseph Campbell thing, always seen as nearly, well, he didn't have a road trip, but like the journey kind of where it's like a nearly a rite of passage, where like people leave something and then when they come back they're a changed person. For the better. It's like with what's the example of it? It's always used, like with a honeymoon, where like a couple, they're not really seen as being married until they go off on their honeymoon, and then they return and they're seen as a married couple. And it happens a lot of times with people. You leave home,
get a new perspective and come back with a I suppose a broader sense of everything.
So you have Jack going through that and then he comes back kind of realising what Project Mayhem is and what Tyler Durden actually is, and like it is at the end of that his journey, he kind of discovers that he is Tyler Durden and he's the one, or Tyler Durden is a part of him or whatever.
That's it. And at the time as well, it was a big, huge reveal.
Oh, it was fucking massive, yeah.
Some people are like, oh yeah, I saw it coming. I watched that film the first time and I was absolutely blown away when everything, and it does the whole cinematic trick of everything starts to judder and feel very unreal as he kind of goes, oh my God, she's just called me Tyler. And it's like, oh, Jesus. And then when you see the flashbacks, you're kind of, I rewatched it a number of times trying to see throughout the film, did they actually ever have a part where you could see them interacting properly, or, to give some sort of hint that Tyler Durden was real and another person outside of him. It wasn't. If you go back through it all, they show him like tossing himself downstairs, and he's the one that has the sort of the part-time job at night, and he's the one who found the abandoned house, and it's just, it all matches up. It's done very, very well.
It is done brilliantly. It's now, you were saying, there were some people I did pick up, and I was trying to think what point was it where I kind of
started to,
because I had it in my head and I was kind of like, he's Tyler Durden in it. Or there's going to be some kind of thing like that, and I think it was when he had the fight with himself in the boss's room, and he mentioned something about, he said for something about this reminded me of the first fight in the car, and I think that kind of just made me go, that's
there's your kind of
that's
your first big hint.
But as well, it's gas when you look back through it, how often, when you know about the splicing, how often Tyler Durden is spliced
straight
into
away,
it,
like in the fucking opening scenes, like there's like these very tiny little flash frames of like men with penises out kind of a thing, and that's Tyler Durden's whole thing. So it's a bit of Seed of Chaos kind of a thing, and you realise then it's very meta, like you're watching the film and you're seeing, like, as they call it, the cigarette burns for lining up to change over on the reels in when it's being projected in the cinema, and it is all of a sudden you kind of, suddenly you're watching a film that's telling you what you're experiencing and actually doing it to you yourself as well, if you know what I mean. So it's a very interesting way to kind of, have more layers even to it, you know?
Yeah, well, it's looking back at it as well. I only copped it this time. At least I think I copped it. I don't know. There might be a thing in it. At the start of it, when he's going through the insomnia thing and he's looking at stuff, remember he mentions at some point, you know the way they're working in restaurants a lot, or a hotel.
Yeah.
And he mentions about Tyler Durden being caught up in a lawsuit over kind of like, the urine content of fucking soup or something. But there's a bit where he's looking at the television and it shows that catering place and it shows a group of the waiters there, and one of them I think is Brad Pitt. So it's like, is that the point where he's watching these things and he sees like an image of that guy and it subconsciously becomes Tyler Durden in his head? Does he create Tyler Durden at that point? Of course, in the sequels, it's Tyler Durden's been with him since he's a kid. Yeah. He kind of like envisions him as being a stepbrother. With it, which I don't know. I don't really like. I mean, there's bits near the end, kind of say with people's perspectives of it. I always kind of think of it as being nearly a horror movie, a possession movie, especially. Like when he finds out about Tyler, when he's in the building and they're having that fight after he diffuses the bomb, the music goes from being the fucking say
kind of
electronic, it goes to horror drones. Yeah. It's just like, and it's really and I never really heard the music for that part. It's just we got a better sound bar and I could hear it properly. And that was like very much, and even the whole thing with him being dragged, it was nearly like he couldn't have done it himself. Where it nearly comes across as if Tyler Durden is that external
some sort
force.
Of supernatural force. Yeah.
And is he's dragged upstairs and thrown downstairs and lifted up off the ground, where it's like, how could you lift yourself up off?
Yeah.
You know that there is an element of that thing with it, and like he performs an exorcism on himself with
basically by
the bullet
shooting himself in the face. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, I suppose, I mean, I kind of always viewed it as sort of a one-man sort of mental breakdown, how easily people can get sucked along and how many people out there that are kind of caught. Like, I mean, a lot of it gets tipped off again when it's his apartment basically explodes. He goes home one night after a trip and it's like his gas cooker or something has been left on and his whole apartment is wiped out. So he's lost everything in his life that he said himself he was so close to having finalised and perfect. Like, he had the job, he had the apartment, he had the wardrobe almost full of clothes, he had the apartment almost full of furniture, the cookie cutter IKEA kind of thing, and then it's all taken away and he realises, I actually don't have anyone I can call except two random single servant friends, I suppose, that he's bumped into once or twice that he doesn't even know their surname, kind of a thing. Well, and I think that kind of just causes the realisation then, and he's so disaffected and so disillusioned with life, and then all these other men start showing up with the same sort of issues in their life as well, and they find some sort of a weird family, I suppose, really.
Well, it's just when you were saying about with the whole thing with the explosion of the apartment and stuff, and it's even mentioned about like with his fucking yin yang table at the start, like having the dualism there. But there's a lot of stuff like Tyler Durden says it throughout, where he's like the person who liberated you from your belongings and stuff. Like, it is a cult, but there's a lot of like Tibetan Buddhism things thrown in, or
you're
like
not your possessions, you're not your belongings.
Yeah, a bit, but like
you're not a special snowflake.
Yeah, a bit of a twisted kind of version of it as well. This is the whole thing with Tyler Durden, where Tyler Durden sees himself as he's basically just a user. Anyway, like he uses the narrator to get to the point where he can be fully in control. Then when he gets to that point, he doesn't want to have
need him again, exactly
anymore. Yeah. He's like, when he gets fully and he uses all these other, and you see
he uses Marla Singer as well. Yeah, like,
and Angel Face, like what's his fucking Jared Leto's character. You can see that there's all these people in it that just love him, and then later on when you see people with the chemical burns on their hands.
It's like an indoctrination, like a little ritual, sort of a hazing, I suppose, to join our cult.
But he just sees them as being human sacrifices. That's what he refers to them as in his bedroom, up in the thing where he has the thing. It's just human sacrifices. So he doesn't give a shit about these men at all. He just sees them as being idiots that he's after manipulating into
and they serve his purpose, give their life for him as well, and for the cause, I suppose.
That they're just single serve people as well, where it's just like, just use them. Whereas I think that's the whole thing. It's when Bob dies that fucking, like I was saying, that Jack, we'll call him, or the narrator, is affected
Yeah.
Whereas like none of the rest of them, they do get into the whole
Well,
thing.
they're affected, I suppose, insofar as everybody is like nameless, I suppose, once they join Project Mayhem, because it's meant to be just like, right, okay, nobody kind of has an identity anymore. And then when Robert Paulson does die, the narrator Jack is like, my God, this is not just some slab of meat, this is a man, he was a friend of mine, his name was Robert Paulson. Of course they oh my God, in death you achieve your you are known, it's your identity, or you finally release your potential, I suppose, and it becomes the chant then, his name was Robert Paulson. And it's even worse, because then it's suddenly death is something to aspire to, because that's
well, that's the
you're
whole,
ascribed meaning in death kind of a thing.
well, that's nearly a Tibetan fucking Buddhist thing as well, isn't it? Where it's like life should be suffering and pain, and you just go on kind of like performing kind of like menial tasks. And it is the thing that they're all seen as drones beforehand, and they're all looking for nearly some form of enlightenment or breaking out
meaning,
of it. And then they dip into like an even worse.
That's it. But I suppose, to me, their aspirations are relatively noble and are something that people should kind of keep in mind to, because it was, well, look, okay, we are the people who, clean your rubbish, we, make your sewage run, we make your foods turn up on time, and yet you're all out here, you capitalist billionaires or whatever, treating us like absolute shit, and don't forget at any time that we can rise up and we can make your life hell. Now the thing is, people never seem to do that. It takes an awful lot. Like, look at us, look at the way the economy is at the moment.
But even that's, I don't like the whole thing. I think with Project Mayhem was to reset things.
Well, this is it. It's to rebalance there, because the main goal at the end was, right, we're resetting credit to zero, so anyone who's run up debt or anything like that, it's wiped. Anyone who's owed money, it's wiped.
Utter chaos. That it was the whole kind of, I think it gets into it more in the book, where it's not that there was this noble thing where it was like, oh, we'll reset kind of like the credit thing and everyone will be on it. It was like to bring things down to a fucking apocalyptic level, where they told people to start tearing each other apart, and it'd be a real Nietzschean or kind of like fucking Hobbes Leviathan style thing, where it's like survival of the fucking fittest. And then it'll go back to it'll go back, because I think there's the bit where he's like talking about being the all dancing, all seeing eye. And he makes some about like, hunting deer in the in like the abandoned skyscrapers. So it'll be this whole thing about nature taking over again. And then people will be back living a more primitive life. Where that's where he basically wants the destruction of society. He's an anarchist. It is about anarchy. With it. And of course, if you're looking at it from the sequel's point of view, that they kind of hint that he's basically Satan, that he was the snake. In Adam and Eve. And I think like in the third one, I couldn't be bothered reading it, because like I'm making it sound better. Like I was saying it to you, you were like, oh, it sounds good, and I was like, the idea behind it sounds really good, but the execution is terrible. 3, it's just all over the place, where you're like, what the fuck is going on, and it's just done really, really badly with it. But like, going from that kind of point of view, that he is just he's like evil.
Evil. But it's, I'm sure there's a lot of people could probably relate in general and in overall to everything that's going on, sort of the lack of belonging in the world, the wanting to be someone cooler, better, stronger, more handsome, more sort of able to just do things without giving a shit. I'm sure there's a lot of people who would watch that kind of going, yeah, fucking I can see why, he looks up to Tyler Durden, or he wants to be Tyler Durden, or in fact why he materialised Tyler Durden out of his imagination to be that person and that outlet that he felt he couldn't be himself, because he was so boxed in such a real normal, boring, safe little life that he can't break out of.
Well, as well, it's like when people are, as well, when they talk about the whole kind of toxic masculinity thing, and there was a lot of people, I think, at the time, and probably to this day, that got the whole fucking wrong end of the stick.
Like, let's go out and start our own fight club.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's what we should be doing. And as well, where it's they kind of pick up on this misogynistic thing in it, where it's, you know, there's like Tyler Durden says, I don't think women are the answer to, we were a generation raised by women, and it's kind of like, I don't think another woman is the answer to it. When Jack says that, kind of like, this all started with Marla, it's almost as if, well, he does blame her for it.
He was blaming her, and he's like, well, you know, sort of look for answers in yourself, don't be looking to externalise it or blame other people either as well, you know.
And we were looking at a video before, someone had an interesting idea about, which it's actually not true at all, but I think it is an interesting interpretation of it, that Marla is actually another aspect of his personality, that she's not real at all.
Just like Tyler Durden, because again, they say you don't really see her interacting with anyone outside of Jack. She sort of, she doesn't have any impact, I suppose. It's her interactions with him. It's the female side, feminine side of him, whereas Tyler is the more masculine.
But at the same point, that you do have the thing where she takes the overdose and the ambulance people are there, and as well you have her selling stuff in the other and she is at these and you see someone trying to approach her at the thing, so you know she's very much real. But I think it's the way that it's done. It's like other people, they're not part of the story, they're not part of the narration, so unless you're actually part of the story, they don't have interactions with people. Like,
that's it. And I suppose interesting enough, she's one of the only few female characters. The only other ones really was what's her name, the lady with the cancer, I can't remember.
Oh yeah.
You know, and it's sort of like, again, it's like
Chloe, that's
right, sort of like facing death and staring it down and wanting that human connection again one last time, and, you know, wanting to feel something before she dies. And I suppose that speaks again to, that's what everyone in the film seems to be chasing. It's just that connection, that bit of support, to be able to have something more than your mundane existence.
Well, this is it. Is, like, I mean, I think because now you're talking like fucking nearly 30 years later, the world is a very different place, and like people, especially after COVID, are very isolated, and there's like people are feeling more. But I think this was nearly the start of that thing, and nearly not the downfall of society, but definitely
Fight Club being the downfall of society.
But no, but like at that point in time where it's like people stopped, like community was definitely collapsing. Like, I mean, say people before our generation, the thing that you'd always hear in Ireland was like, oh, you wouldn't know anyone living around you now. Whereas like, it was this romanticised view before where you'd know your neighbours, you'd leave your door open.
Yeah, you'd be friendly and helpful to people and all the rest. But that's, I suppose, the way that it is, it's globalisation, it's commercialism and capitalism really has driven the way everything has turned, because people have to move hundreds of miles away from their usual family unit to be able to get a job that, you know, pays enough to live or whatever. People can't afford to stay in their own neighbourhoods because of the cost of living and the cost of houses and all the rest. So you end up with fractured families. People lose their friend connection as well, because when you move, it's so hard to keep in touch as people are working so much and they have so many different schedules. It's hard to keep in, you know, even in contact with people, you know, once you move away from that initial sort of place where you meet them. So everyone nowadays just seems to be single servant friends.
And there was nearly that whole kind of thing where it's like what happened after the Industrial Revolution, where it was, I remember seeing a thing about it over in America. There used to be this talk of, say, conspiracy theories about, I think it was Project Greenlands or Deadlands or something like that, where it was this thing where people were saying that there was fucking an effort
to get everyone into cities,
and destroy kind of like, say, middle America,
and to break down like your close knit rural communities, I suppose.
And just have everyone, and like that was like, whether it was manufactured or not, but that definitely was happening kind of nearly all over the world.
And turning
well in developed countries,
into worker drones, which again is addressed in Fight Club. You know, he does these little haiku to send round to his fellow workers via email. Because
that was like, we're definitely with the, I suppose you call it maybe the second industrial revolution, or like the technological tech revolution. The start of it was definitely the late 90s, and people started moving. If you wanted a job in it, like, you're not going to be getting a job like where we were at the time.
Exactly.
It was like
a little village, and you know miles away from.
There was like factory work and stuff, and even at that was starting to
go downhill.
Like,
exactly. Manufacturing was totally.
So if you wanted to work in tech, you'd have to go to someplace like Dublin, or
capital city, 100 miles away or whatever. Yeah, that's it.
And so I'd imagine through Silicon Valley, it would have been the birth of Silicon Valley, or it would have been around for a long, but like definitely the
that's
growth.
When it took off, all right. But it is, and that's, I think, like as I said with COVID as well, people have gotten even more and more fractured as well. You know, there's working from home, which I don't think is a bad thing in general, but only if it's sort of your choice and you're not like the way things have turned. a lot of the time you're more isolated because you couldn't go out, you couldn't socialise, you're sort of, all you're doing is you're waking up, you're working, you're going back to sleep again, and all you have time to do is consume, really. It's like, I'll buy shit online just to, try and fill the numb hole that has, been created by not having people in your life.
And I think people got very fed up with socialising online
very quickly,
with stuff like, I don't know how much of a thing it was for people, but like, I mean, definitely I remember where I was working, they used to be trying to organise quiz nights the whole
little
time,
Zoom parties and stuff. Let's all do something on a Friday night just so we have social interaction, which is good. I think people needed to try and keep those links, but I do think the links, they've been breaking down steadily, I think, since the late 80s, the early 90s. I know people have always had to move around for jobs and stuff like that, but it just seems to be far more of a thing nowadays. People don't have long-lasting connections.
You have people, let's say, in that similar situations where their friends are gone and this and that, and so they're left on their own. And they can't even make friends in work now because there was a it would have been just after COVID. I started work in a place and there was a girl in there she was just starting college and she was in on work experience. And I think she was in second year or something like that. And I totally forgot. She had not had the usual college experience. She had no friends because she wasn't after really meeting any of her classmates other than online.
Sitting in a class, and how can you talk when you're in a class like?
She didn't know what she was looking forward to, kind of like at some stage meeting her classmates and having a party, but sure, none of them really wanted to do it because
it's like meeting a bunch of strangers, basically.
And they were like just nervous about it, and the anxiety around it. It's just so. That it was just really weird. Even like the only friends that she had were people like she considered people that she was after meeting in on her work experience, which I'm sure there's nothing wrong with that. Like that's how we make friends in loads of different ways. But it's normally you would have your college friends, and for a certain group of people at a certain age, they're fixed friends for a certain amount of time.
With them,
whereas that seems to be gone now.
Yeah, that's it. People don't have the ability to actually get out and socialise and all the rest. But it is, like, I mean, that's what I was saying. Like, that film was very relevant back then. It seems to be even more relevant now, the way people are going. And if you look around the world as well, the way there are people sort of grouping together, there's vigilantes, there's this, there's that, there's people, right, let's go out and I'm unhappy with my life. I'm going to go out and fucking beat up a stranger just to feel something. Or I'm going to, we'll band together and we'll go out and we'll cause destruction downtown in some, financial district or something like that. And it seems to be happening all over the fucking world at the moment. Everyone is very dissatisfied with life in general.
Well, and when Fight Club came out, it was a flop.
That's what I couldn't understand. I was like, this film is fucking brilliant. How are more people not like, holding this up as like, my God, this is like really catching the zeitgeist. It's a reflection of everything at the time. Because at the time as well, it was very much this kind of lag culture as well was in. And, sort of all these toxic masculinity, as you were saying, it was all like, have few drinks and fucking, repress your feelings kind of a thing. Real boorish kind of a thing. Yeah. So it was... it was of its time, but I think it stands the test of time as well. Yeah, well, like, I mean, the whole thing is like Tyler Durden was seen as an aspirational figure by a lot of people at the time, and even like down to his physique and stuff. Like that's all that people seem to miss the message of it. Like there's even a bit like, is that cool. What real men look like with their abs and stuff? And of course, you're Tyler Durden. It's where it's like that, but people didn't fucking. They're all, I want to be like that. He's got a cool leather jacket.
I want to be out fighting people. Where can I buy it? Where they did not get the message. There is a certain group of people that did not get the message. But you're going to get that with anything. But it's, they really didn't do well at all. Like, it's just... I don't know. When I saw it in the cinemas, but of course, with a film with a message like that and that's that many layers, historically movies like that don't do.
And people are going to get out with what they want as well. There'll be the very superficial layer that will just go, Fight Club, it would be cool to start one of them. And then there'll be other people that will get different things out of it and all the rest. Like, I'm sure, as a lady, I've probably gotten a lot of different meanings out of it than, say, a young fellow watching it at the time, But it's just, it does really resonate with you across the whole thing. Like, I mean, somebody else said it, like, there's loads of films where women are off, like, connecting and talking and about their life and all the rest. It's not really the same for fellas.
No, they were saying that there's Fight Club and
Dead Poets Society.
Yeah.
And that's about it, really, I suppose. I do think that obviously has changed a lot since then. There are, there's sort of like guy films, but it
like
tends.
what?
Well, I suppose Bill Burr's latest film even was about
yeah,
dads.
I suppose
you have like guys talking about things.
Yeah, well, you always had kind of films like
that's
that.
what I mean.
Anyway,
you have a few things like that, which are more comedy, I suppose, as well.
But even with that, it still does sell the whole kind of like, oh, you should be a tough guy kind of thing.
Exactly,
Don't take shit from people. And
that's true, yeah. Again, it's just perpetrating, I suppose, sort of the whole idea.
As well, like the whole thing with Fight Club, it really, I suppose, what the people would be saying about like the fucking the betas and that kind of fucking
all this alpha
talk, where it's like all these people, they're betas, they're cooks as well, where like even the guy, like all these guys, it's always a fear of losing your balls, and most of them even kind of with the testicular cancer group, where it's like a guy talking about, oh, my wife left me, like she's entitled to, where it shouldn't be. No, she's not entitled. It's like, fuck her, fucking bitch would not support you through your fucking thing. Yeah. Don't be fucking making excuses for her. If you fucking left someone who had cancer, you'd be a piece of shit, like regardless of gender. Where it should be that, don't be making excuses for people. I was kind of like, oh, right, I don't want to come across as being a misogynist.
But no, I think that even if you want to look at just that one little aspect, it was she moved on and she married another guy and had a kid, and he was like, oh, I'm so happy for her, she finally got to have a kid. And again, you see there's an awful lot of these people, either they have kids and they've lost contact with them, they don't talk to their adult kid, which you see with Bob, sort of the wife left him and the kids don't talk to him.
He was abandoned just because he had like hormonal changes and he grew tits basically.
But like you see these people, they're either abandoned by their kids, or they don't have contact with the kids, or they don't have kids in the first place. There's all this thing about, like, say, procreation and carrying on the line and all the rest. And a lot of these people just have absolutely all their connections have been broken. There's no sort of downline, shall we say, down to their kids. They don't have that feeling of being able having anything worthwhile to pass on, or anything worthwhile to pass their world onto. So I think it's a very nihilistic kind of a film as well, obviously, whereas like
even the colours too, like it's very industrial.
It is. It's all these greys and greens. Very kind of sickly cast the whole time. Edward Norton as well, of course, just looks horrendous, bags under the eyes the whole time and just completely worn out.
Like as well, we've been talking a lot about themes and things, but like say on a technical aspect of it, a film aspect to it, soundtrack is fucking amazing by the Dust Brothers, and that was something that wasn't really done much at the time, where it was like electronic music used as the main soundtrack. Whether it was always either orchestral, or maybe just kind of like putting pop songs in.
Actual songs.
Whereas like I'm sure it was like, I suppose you can say stuff like with fucking Tangerine Dream and all that, but still, even with that, they were still doing. Yeah,
it's kind of a one-off. It was unusual to have that, whereas nowadays it's like the norm to have like a 7 soundtrack, a fucking Fight Club soundtrack, that kind of a thing, a 9-inch Nail, a Trent Reznor soundtrack.
Well, that's it. And like the Dust Brothers, they really did some unusual things musically through it, where it's like there was a lot, like there's some heavy elements to it, there's fucking hip-hop elements, it was a real mix mash. And like you're like late 90s, it's like 90s was a great time, I think, an experimental time for music, but that was definitely there was something in it for everyone in a weird way. Cast wise, amazing cast.
Oh god, yeah.
In it, and it's hard for people. Brad Pitt was seen as a bit of a fucking joke before this. He was like in a lot of rom-coms.
He was a pretty boy, whereas this was like he was a dangerous character kind of thing. Yeah.
And even with him, like when he was in Interview with the Vampire, people were like, this guy can't act. Which he couldn't really. I quite liked him as Louis in Interview with the Vampire. And I quite was like, one of my brother's favourite films at the time was A River Flows Through It. He was in that as well, which he could act, and I suppose Thelma and Louise was where he got his big break, start, wasn't it? And was it a Levi's ad?
Yeah, I think he might have done Levi's ad as well.
Which for people who weren't around, that Levi's ads were like these fucking...
They were like star makers. Everyone used to wait for the Levi's ad to come out, because whatever music they use on it would
be
top
number
the charts.
one,
And if they had an actor or a model in it, they would be like the next big thing kind of a thing. And it was, I don't know, it was kind of like, I suppose, the same as Coke and Pepsi ads as well.
Yeah.
Levi's were the big thing.
I can't really think
but
of
again,
anything
there you
that
have like
equates
this
it nowadays.
whole kind of consumerism and you know, brand loyalty and all the rest.
It was like the 80s and the 90s were definitely like, I think the 80s was the height of consumer. Well, not the height because people are spending fucking more now, but people really just going into, like, it was the whole thing of greed is good and all that. Then the 90s, I think, was the fallout from it, where a lot of people are going, this is like after creating a very shallow existence, and it's actually probably after damaging humanity and creativity.
But even in Fight Club, you see it. There's Starbucks kind of pops up the whole way through it as well. You know, it's the coffee that keeps them awake. I'm nearly sure at some stage as well you hear sort of like the Spice Girls, you know, singing on a Pepsi ad or something like that, and it just kind of snapped me right back to like being there and all the rest. But Fight Club itself, when it was, I think they did a bit of a re-release for like, was it the 20th anniversary?
I don't know.
But they actually had on a side note, they had very good marketing and advertising themselves. They were doing like fight soap bars.
Oh yeah,
Fight Club, they had stuff like that, and you know, sort of bring a bit of hype back to the film. So
well, that's I think as well with the soap, and you're just talking about, people did not get the soap because it was like the cover of being the bar of soap with Fight Club on, people just sitting, and as well the way that it was received by some critics at the time, or it was, they kind of sold it as being this gore fest, that it was something that you shouldn't look at if you had a weak stomach, and I think that put a lot of people off going to the cinema as well, whereas like,
you do have a lot of people that would be like, I mean, geez, we've, you know, sort of the older generation, I suppose, as well, they'd be like, oh my god, boxing, it's so violent, it's not really, so how can you watch, you know, like MMA and UFC nowadays?
UFC fucking took a lot, it's hard for people that weren't around, but it took UFC, fucking mixed martial arts in general, a long time to be accepted
deemed as anyway respectable class as a sport or like that. So I think there was that aspect there. It's like, oh, it's glorifying violence, and you're just
it was
going to
promoting kind of fight clubs and kind of like that would have a negative impact on young men.
Yeah, and how could you sit and watch somebody get their face smashed in? Now, I mean, there's brutal scenes in it, all right, and you know, even when Bob gets shot, and you know, they open up the body bag and half the back of his head falls out. It's fucking gory and brutal, but it's kind of honest and unflinching.
Yeah, but it's meant to be to show that like this is
the horrible reality. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, this is, somebody has died, someone's life has been lost. You know, it is fucking shocking. Like you know, even now looking at it, you know, you see, as I said, Angel Face getting bet, and he loses the pretty boy looks and all the rest, and it's a proper, like, you see him healing up throughout it, and he's, you know, broken eye sockets and teeth missing and all the rest, and it's, you know, you kind of...
I quite like the way that they treat the audience as intelligent with it, is where they don't get into his backstory, have a big kind of talk about it. It's just showing, you know, it's kind of like he idolizes Tyler Durden. There's stuff going on there, but they never have to outwardly...
Yeah, you don't have to explain it like they would, you know.
This guy gets destroyed and he's still loyal, and even more loyal afterwards too. It's really cult, like, anyway, behaviour, where it's like, you know, people being
follow
abused.
The leader, basically, and just taking it, But I mean, it, as I said, it's been one of my favorite. The minute I saw it, I was like, oh my god, I love this film, and it has stayed consistently in like my top 3 films, I suppose.
Well, because Meatloaf was brilliant in it, as well as Bob.
That's the thing. There's a lot of touches of humour as well, where you kind of, and there's sweet little moments as well where there is genuine connection, you know, and there is genuine caring and feeling. And of course, there are I suppose there's the comedy ones where like one of your assignments is to go out and start a fight with anybody. Just let them win, but just start a fight with someone, and they have all the, you know, they have the comedy part music, and you know, your man spraying the priest with water, trying to get somebody to just take a swing and, you know, take a chance on their life, I suppose, break out of their mundane little box. But do you know what I mean? It has a flavour of everything, I suppose. Really, it isn't, from the sounds of it, if you're to go into it blind, it sounds very heavy and very dark. It's like people dying of cancer, and, you know, people disconnected. But there's, you know, there's some moments in it where you can sit back and enjoy, like, you know?
Like, just it could be seen as a dark rom-com, because at the centre of it as well is the relationship with Marla.
I suppose she essentially kind of saves him as well. You know, she's, no matter how badly she's treated, she comes back and she believes him, and she does care for him, and he genuinely cares for her.
Like,
as well,
they're both fucked up. You know, they're both basically the same. To a certain degree. Like, she's probably more down on her luck with stuff where, like, she's impoverished where he's got the job and all that, but she's just like she's after fucking this is the great thing, you never know what happened with Marley.
Yeah, you never
don't
know her actual background. Yeah, she's just living in a shithole and squalor, and she's kind of panhandling nearly to make money, and just chain smoking, close to overdosing, turning up at these support groups and looking grotty and grimy the whole time. But even that, there's sort of a purpose to it. She turns up in this thrifted bridesmaid's dress, and she's like, oh, somebody loved this intensely for one day, and then it was just thrown away, a bit like myself, kind of.
Yeah.
And that's, I suppose, again, a commentary on people's fleeting relationships as well. The single servant friends, somebody gets on with you great, and then all of a sudden you never see that person again. It's discarded,
Well, it's her character. I think it goes from at the start where you kind of nearly side with Edward Norton's character, where you're like, oh, this part, but even though the two of them are the same, and then as it goes through, you kind of feel more sorry for her.
Yeah, a lot more sympathy for her. Yeah. She's a bit of a tragic figure, but she knows she's a tragic figure, but she doesn't care, and she's like, fuck it.
See, I think they try and nearly portray her as being like a Yoko Ono, or people can perceive her as being a Yoko Ono at the start, where there's like this buddy relationship, and then she comes into it and ruins
the harmony, I suppose, of it and all the rest, but at the end of the day, she's essentially saving him from himself,
Yeah, well, that is the whole thing. Well, he saves himself.
Yes,
from himself,
That's true, I suppose, and that ending as well, I mean, Jesus, it's
fucking fantastic, because most times there's a happy ending to it, and I think there is a different ending over in China to it originally, where they didn't show the buildings collapsing, and then a thing came up saying, oh, Tyler Durden was apprehended, and where there had to be
a resolution as such,
but there had to be, he couldn't just get off scot-free. It was like, I had to kind of portray this whole thing of being like, that there's repercussions.
For your crimes. Exactly.
Don't be getting ideas, people.
Exactly. But that's, and hilariously enough, one of the last scenes in the film is just of the two of them looking out at all the skyscrapers, holding hands. That was used on so many promotional materials as well. It's very rare that you can get that in a film where you can show the last scene and have it be iconic, and nobody knows what the fuck is leading up to it, because they do that whole thing of they start off with at the very end, and then it's like, well, how did I get here? Let's back up a few months, kind of thing. Because the opening scene is him with a gun in his mouth, so you don't know what the fuck is going on. But I just thought it was, it's a nice way. It wasn't done as often back then, this whole bookending of things is,
I think it was done very much. I think Fight Club influenced a lot, even though it did the same as like a lot of great cult movies. Blade Runner, fucking, even though Blade Runner did terrible when it came out.
Yeah, but again, absolute
The Shining, I think, did terrible when it came out as well. That wasn't really well received. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, it's this work of genius.
Yeah, that's it.
Friday the 13th Part 7 wasn't received well.
A total work of genius. Yes, indeed. But, yes.
Or Part 8, Jason Goes to Hell. Or was it? Or was that Jason Takes Manhattan? Yeah, I think 9 was Jason Goes to Hell.
But again, back to Fight Club. I mean, it's even more relevant today, where you have all this like special snow. I don't want to sound like, oh, I'm a big boomer like against snowflakes, but you have this culture of everyone is the center of their own world. They are the main character. Instagram, whatever, TikTok. It's like everyone thinks they're the most important or the most unique and the most special. It's like there's like millions of people out there all doing exactly the same things, where you're just shouting into the void like you are not that special.
Like this podcast.
Yes, exactly. There you go. Yeah.
Well, it is. I think it's people's attempt to connect with other people. And like, if people wanted to connect with us, you could do so through our YouTube channel or through our Instagram or Twitter.
Yes, mentioning Instagram. Yes, exactly.
But there is that whole thing. I think now as well, at the time, it does feel like social media is dying, or definitely going through some
major upheaval,
change, I think, where people are struggling
I think some people are turning away from it entirely. Some people are realising that, oh my God, it has actually, in some ways it's been good, but in a lot of ways it's had a very toxic effect.
Oh God, it's like a lot of comments that seeing things now. You just kind of go, what's the point? Even engaging
and you do have you get this. I mean, like, very relevant recently, I suppose, with everything that's going on in the world. You get people get very entrenched in their views and get frothed up and kind of fomented into these like extremist views, kind of a thing, and then it's just what is meant to bring people together is actually driving people further apart, and the disconnect is there. Which, there you go.
Yes, I suppose we end on that fairly depressing kind of note.
Yes, indeed. But let's go start our own Fight Club.
Yes.
Let's go beat each other up.
Yeah, I get to hit you first.
Oh no. Yes, indeed. But yes.
But yeah, we could, there's so much the Fight Club that we could.
Oh, you could do like 4 or 5 hours, like you rambling around about, and you still wouldn't even touch half of what you could touch. I suppose. Really, there's been books written about. I did an essay in college about it in film school, and straight away when it came out, and all the lecturers like, "What is this film?"
Yeah, what's this shit?
Yes, this is stupid. But anyway.
Yeah, but yeah. So look. Goodbye, I suppose. I don't know how to finish it off. But yeah, next week, I don't know. I think we're going to have to do American Psycho at some point, because I think American Psycho is a good companion piece. Yeah. More so the book, probably, than the movie, but the movie is really good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I think they're two very different entities, really.
Yeah. But, yes. Yeah.
Yes. So, yes, thank you for listening. And, yeah.
I am Jack's quiet ending.
Yes.